Have you ever had to just move forward with faith and you weren't sure what was going to happen, but you just knew you needed to move forward? And then the witness came later. Or maybe you're still in that moving forward with faith moment. This week with section 1 is the perfect moment to learn about how the Lord often works with those who are building his kingdom. So this section 1, is out of order. It is the preface to the Doctrine and Covenants. Next week, we will study the first vision and it'll be more chronological. But section 1 is the preface. And at this point, the church is a year and a half old. The Book of Mormon has been published, the priest has been restored, the church is officially organized, and the saints are living in Kirtland. And Joseph had received a number of revelations, over 60 revelations. And the question was, should they publish them? And that's a big question to ask. Should they make another book, which would be expensive for a struggling church, but also what would happen if we did another book of scripture? We already have the Book of Mormon, but the Lord was speaking to his prophet and people wanted to know what he was saying. The missionaries wanted copies to tell people about what the Lord was saying. And so ultimately it was decided to publish these revelations. What is so incredible about this is the humility shown by these church leaders at the time, because a lot of these revelations were rebukes from the Lord. The Lord was guiding them in their weaknesses as they were building the church, and there was a lot of correction happening, but they weren't hiding that. They were letting that be seen. So they moved forward with this, and William E. McClellan and Sidney Rigdon and Oliver Cowdery get together to write a preface for the Doctrine and Covenants, or at the time, it was called the Book of Commandments. And that is a massive task, to write a preface for the Lord's words. When it all was said and done, they failed. And so they turned to Joseph, and there's a group of men in a room, and they turn to Joseph and say, we need help with this. And then Joseph prays to the Lord. And at that moment, in front of everyone, he receives the Lord's preface. At this moment, when maybe they were still just moving forward with faith on publishing this book, the Lord witnesses to them that this is supposed to happen, but it is meant to go to the entire world. So they were moving forward with publishing the revelations to give to the missionaries to have in the church, but the Lord had a much bigger, grander plan. So not only is the Lord talking to the whole world, he starts with hearken, and then he says, listen together, like the whole world listen together. And then he explains the things that will be coming to the earth. So as you're in this with your family, notice the things that the Lord wants us and the whole world to know. And he explains that because of these last days and the things that are coming, he has created a refuge through his gospel that's coming through Joseph, and he's calling the weak of the world to proclaim it, which was them and it is us. And then he tells us to search these commandments. And at that time, this was going to be called the Book of Commandments. So he's telling us not just to read it, but to search it. So at that time, this is when they did typeset printing, and the church had a printing press in Jackson County. And this was the printing press they were going to print this book on. And so if you're going to do hearken, you're taking the H and the E and the A, and you're laying it all out, and then you're taking 10,000 sheets of paper and printing them, and then you take all the letters out and you do the next page. It was that book and those pages and that printing press that the mob destroyed in Jackson County. So if you know the story of the sisters grabbing some papers and laying on them in the cornfield, it is this book. So this book actually never got published, and then it was soon after published, and more revelations were added in. Now let me just end with the quick study tip. This is something that when I really want to dig and discover something, and I know that there's meaning in there that I'm missing, this is what I do. So I'll read something one time, and I mark my scriptures and I make my notes. I'll show you some scripts. So I just write all over in my scriptures. And then I have a good understanding, then I go in a second time and I'm now searching. I'm searching for what I missed the first time. And that second time is always really meaningful. But then I've learned to go back in a third time. So I've laid the groundwork. I've gone in and I found meaning. And now I have a pretty good understanding. And then I go in that third time it is always in that third time that I find the things I need the most and the things that will stick with me. And this isn't always something we can do every week, but when we can do that, there is knowledge and treasures waiting for us. It is when I do things like that where I feel like I'm truly feasting and when I begin to really hear the voice of the Lord. Okay, see you next week when we study the first vision.